It started like any other late-night appearance, cheers from the audience. A wide grin from Mark Wahlberg, Stephen Colbert's signature wit bouncing off the walls of Studio 54, promoting his latest film. Mark was relaxed at first, cracking jokes, trading stories, and even indulging in Colbert's classic lightning round questions. But the mood shifted when the conversation veered into deeper territory. Stephen, known for his sharp intellect masked behind playfulness, dropped a curveball. "You've talked a lot about faith, discipline, and family," he began. "But some folks say your actions don't always match the message. Thoughts?" The audience let out a collective ooh, and for a split second, Mark's smile faltered. He leaned forward. "You sure you want to go there, Stephen?" he asked, voice calm but cutting. Colbert, unfazed, pressed on mentioning a recent controversy tied to Wahlberg's past remarks, his drawing on comments critics felt were out of step with his public image. Wahlberg's demeanor shifted from amused to agitated. His jaw tightened, the laughter in his eyes gone. "I came here to talk about my work," he snapped, "not to be put on trial." Stephen tried to soften it with a joke, but it landed with a thud. The tension was thick now. Wahlberg adjusted his mic, looked out at the audience, then turned back to Colbert. "This ain't journalism, man. This is ambush TV."
How with that?
He stood up, shrugged off his jacket, and walked off stage, leaving stunned silence in his wake. The band awkwardly tried to strike up music, but the energy had vanished. The screen faded to commercial as murmurs filled the studio. Viewers at home were left speechless. Sans social media exploded within minutes. Mark Wahlberg walking out on The Late Show wasn't just a moment tit, was a message. Asterisk backstage. The air was electric with confusion and urgency. Producers scrambled, unsure whether to coax Mark back or pivot the show entirely. Wahlberg, meanwhile, wasn't yelling or throwing things. He was just done. Calm, but visibly fuming, he removed his mic and looked one of the staffers dead in the eye. "I've done 1,000 interviews. This wasn't one," he muttered before grabbing his coat and walking toward the exit. News of his walkout spread in real time. By the time Stephen Colbert returned from commercial, social media was on fire. Clips from the moment his expression hardening, the exact second he stood up, were already trending. Colbert tried to smooth things over, brushing off the confrontation with his usual smirk. "Well," he said to the camera, "that went better than expected," drawing nervous laughter from the audience. But even he knew the energy had shifted. Asterisk outside, fans were divided. Some praised Wahlberg for drawing the line and refusing to be baited on national television. Others argued that public figures can't expect softballs forever, especially when their image is part of their brand. News outlets pounced. Within hours, headlines were everywhere. Wahlberg walks out. Colbert cornered a guest again. The night the interview blew up. But what stood out most was Wahlberg's silence. He didn't post a statement. He didn't go on Instagram Live. No cryptic tweets, no PR spin, just silence. That alone made the moment feel heavier, more real. He hadn't flamed out for ratings. He had walked away because he'd had enough. And whether you stood with him or not, the message was crystal clear. Not every seat on a talk show is worth staying in. Asterisk by morning. The walk-off had become more than just a viral moment. It was a cultural flashpoint. News anchors on every network dissected the exchange. Late-night competitors chimed in with jabs and half-hearted jokes. Podcasts ran emergency episodes. And in the comments sections across every platform, thousands debated who was right and who crossed the line. Some praised Colbert for asking hard questions, insisting celebrities shouldn't expect immunity. Others argued that Wahlberg had every right to walk away from what felt more like a trap than a conversation. But beneath all the noise, one truth lingered. Something about this clash had struck a nerve. Maybe it was the disillusionment with performative interviews. Maybe it was the way Wahlberg's quiet departure said more than a screaming match ever could. Or maybe people were just tired of the circus. Asterisk 3 days later, a paparazzi clip caught Mark outside a gym. A reporter shouted, "Any regrets about Colbert?" Mark paused, looked over his shoulder and replied, "Nope. I speak with my work." He got into his car and drove off. That short answer ignited another round of discourse, with some fans rallying behind his refusal to be boxed in. Meanwhile, The Late Show issued a vague statement about respecting all guests, and Colbert didn't mention the incident again. But viewers noticed a subtle shift in tone in the next week's shows. More light, more play, less confrontation. It seemed the walkout had left a mark on everyone, not just the one who left. For Wahlberg, the moment wasn't about ego or spectacle, it was about agency. And whether you saw him as thin-skinned or principled, one thing was clear: in an industry built on sound bites and stagecraft, Mark Wahlberg had reminded the world that sometimes the most powerful statement is walking away. Asterisk, the fallout didn't hurt Wahlberg's career. In fact, it seemed to boost it. Streaming numbers for his new film spiked within 48 hours. Interviews from years past were resurfaced, highlighting moments where he emphasized authenticity, discipline, and protecting his peace. Fans and fellow celebrities started weighing in more openly, with some praising his restraint and others admitting they'd wanted to walk off sets themselves, but hadn't had the nerve. The talk show circuit, long known for its carefully controlled chaos, was now on notice. Producers scrambled to revise prep protocols, ensuring guests weren't blindsided. An internal memo from another late-night network leaked, warning hosts to avoid combative segments disguised as humor. Wahlberg hadn't intended to spark change, but he had. Asterisk, meanwhile, within media circles there was introspection. Colbert, known for balancing satire with sincerity, faced quiet but real criticism. There's a fine line between asking real questions and setting someone up, one outlet wrote. And last week, that line got crossed. Colbert's loyalists defended him, calling the moment a fluke. But deep down, everyone knew this wasn't about just one interview. It was about a shift in tone, one driven not by outrage, but exhaustion. Wahlberg's walkout had tapped into a cultural undercurrent. People were tired of fake tension, performative outrage, and celebrity baiting. They wanted realness, or at least the option to opt out. And Mark Wahlberg had done exactly that. Live. Without warning and without apology, asterisk, weeks passed, but the echoes of Wahlberg's walkout didn't fade. They evolved. Think pieces and op-eds began framing the moment as emblematic of a wider media fatigue. Not just for celebrities, but for audiences too. And people weren't just watching for entertainment anymore. They were watching to see who would crack, who would clap back, who might make headlines. But Wahlberg hadn't cracked, he'd resisted. No theatrics, no meltdown, no on-air rebuttal. Just a man recognizing a line had been crossed and choosing to leave. That made the incident stick. It wasn't a scandal, it was a recalibration. The next few times Wahlberg appeared in public, he received standing ovations, not because people agreed with him entirely, but because they respected the boundary he'd drawn. Asterisk, back at The Late Show, the dynamic subtly changed. Guests were still teased, still laughed with. But there was more caution in the Iran, unspoken awareness that no one wanted a repeat of the Wahlberg moment. In industry circles, it gained that name, whispered in production meetings, referenced when planning interviews. Don't cause a Wahlberg became shorthand for don't push too far, don't fake spontaneity, and definitely don't ambush a guest under the guise of conversation. Wahlberg's team, meanwhile, kept quiet. No apologies, no retaliation. The silence worked like gravity, pulling attention, commanding respect. And just like that, Mark Wahlberg had reshaped the rules of engagement, not by yelling, not by branding himself a victim, but by refusing to play the game at all. Asterisk.